It's evident from a lot of the comments on my videos that a significant number of the atheists and skeptics on this app have absolutely no clue how higher education works or what it means for somebody to be an expert. This is evident from the fact that my comment sections are filled with people saying that Dan McClellan is an expert and how dare I try to argue with a scholar. So the entire point of this video is to explain to you guys who say this crap just how stupid those types of comments are. Before I get into this video, I want to briefly mention my academic background because I know if I don't, people will rage about it in the comments. I have 2 master's degrees and I'm currently pursuing a doctorate. My first master's degree was in college student personnel services, and in that program I had graduate courses in a variety of exciting topics such as assessment and accreditation in higher education, legal aspects of higher education, financial aspects of higher education, and so on and so forth. I have worked on college campuses as an academic advisor, I've worked as an area coordinator in residence life, I've worked in career services. My point in mentioning all of this is just to say I've been around higher education a lot. My second master's was in theological studies, and the doctorate I am pursuing is in theology. If your only experience with higher education is a 4-year degree or less, I encourage you to listen to this whole video because chances are you might be saying some dumb stuff and this could help you correct that. So with that out of the way, let's talk about doctoral degrees specifically because that is usually the point at which somebody is deemed an expert. So if somebody has one of these fancy degrees, what does that mean? What did they have to do to get that degree? Does that mean that they speak as an expert in any topic related to their subject? These are the types of questions I want to address. So let's suppose that you have just signed up for a doctoral program in the humanities, something like history, theology, biblical studies, philosophy, whatever. Well, what can you expect going forward? Well, it depends on what location in the world you are doing that degree in. In North America, a doctoral program usually consists of a student taking additional classes, similar to how you would take classes at a graduate or undergraduate level. In addition to taking classes, you are expected to write a dissertation. These tend to be pretty long, often book-sized papers on a specific area that you want to contribute in. Outside North America, these additional classes are often not required and students can go straight to working on their dissertation. Dissertations are the capstone of what a doctoral program is. They are what showcases the student's mastery of the subject and what displays their contribution to their respective field. So here is the most important information and is the entire reason I am making this video. When you write a dissertation, it is extremely narrow in its focus. You are often focusing on a topic that is so narrow that most people can't even fathom writing a book about something that specific. Let me give you an example. Let's suppose that you're a doctoral student pursuing a PhD in history. History is an incredibly broad field, but suppose you were particularly interested in the development of agricultural practices in China during the 1500s. So you write a big, thick dissertation on that topic. You successfully defend it and you are granted a PhD in history. Congratulations. You are now an expert in that area. Suppose that you and I were having an argument about what led to the collapse of the Roman Empire. If we're having this argument and you say, well, I have a PhD in history, so I'm an expert in history, so you should just recognize my authority since you aren't a scholar, that would be really dumb and not at all impressive because the area of history that you are an expert in is not even remotely related to the topic we are discussing. The fact that you wrote a really long book about agriculture in China doesn't mean I should trust what you have to say about the fall of Rome, especially if what you are saying directly contradicts what scholars who specialize in this area are saying. This same thing is true with theology and biblical studies. If somebody gets a PhD in theology because they write about how Leviathan is used in the book of Job, that doesn't mean that they are an authority on what Paul meant when he said something in Thessalonians. The Job scholar might be right. He might be well read on this area, but it's silly to just trust him as an authority if he is not presenting an argument for his position or if he is not citing relevant scholars. The reason I bring this up is because my comment sections are filled with people trying to roast me about how Dan McClellan is an expert and how I try to argue against such a scholar of his magnitude. But these people are apparently just don't realize that Dan is not an expert on many areas that he talks about or which he and I have had disagreements on, such as gospel authorship. Dan's dissertation was regarding cognitive science and how deity was conceptualized in the Hebrew Bible. And that's an interesting subject, and I have no doubt that it was an important contribution to the field. But him writing a book about how deity was conceptualized in the Hebrew Bible is completely irrelevant to questions like who wrote the book of John. Put simply, Dan McClellan is not speaking as an expert or as a relevant scholar when he speaks about things like gospel authorship or early church views on the Trinity. These are not areas that were the subject of his dissertation, nor have they been the subject of any peer-reviewed works that he has published. This does not mean he is wrong. It just means he needs to cite actual relevant scholars and argue for the positions that he holds instead of just asserting them. It also means that if you think he is correct and I am wrong, you need to do more than just point to the letters next to his name, because all of us who actually understand academia and scholarship and understand how he got those letters next to his name know how brain dead stupid it is that you guys treat him as some universal authority. Dan is often just a scholar speaking outside of his area of expertise, but none of his followers recognize this because apparently they just aren't familiar with higher education. And the thing that is so poetically ironic is Dan's gullible followers will scream at the top of their lungs about how they trust scholarship and data over dogma, and then they will in the next breath insult and ignore actual relevant scholars because some guy whose academic credentials are in cognitive science told them to. And if you are going to say, hey Garb, you're not a scholar either. You're not an expert on this either. Yeah, I'm not, and I don't claim to be or pretend to be. In my dialogues with Dan, I have cited scholars whose areas of expertise are in the topics being discussed. And I want to conclude this by saying that Dan, if you're watching this, which you probably are because your fan base tags you and everything, this video, believe it or not, was not an attack on you. It was an attack on your fan club. In your defense, I've never heard you appeal to your credentials instead of arguments, nor have I ever seen you claim to be an expert in the areas that we disagree on. I am not suggesting that you are wrong because you aren't an expert in these areas, and nothing in this video is meant to be directed to the past things that we've disagreed on. I made this video because higher education and scholarship should not be misrepresented as something it's not, and I hope that as a scholar you would admit that you are speaking outside of your area of expertise on these matters.